Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of A Week in Watches. I am your host, Zach Weiss, co-founder of Worn & Wound. Today is a special episode because we are out of the studio, as you can plainly see, and we're actually in Chicago at the Windup Watch Fair Chicago, aptly named. So this week we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Rather than going through just stories that have happened in the last week, we're actually going to go inside to the Windup Watch Fair Chicago, and I am going to just take a look at some of the new releases that have happened at the fair. There's been quite a lot, actually. I'm only going to be able to cover a handful of them, but they're all really excellent, obviously. This week's episode is brought to you by the Windup Watch Shop, of course, where we actually recently launched the Bulova parking meter chronograph, which you can check out right now on windupwatchshop.com. So a brand that I think that all of you are probably likely very familiar with is Laurier. They are a micro watch brand based out of New York City, and they have been a brand we've covered since their very first launch. They're here at Windup Watch for Chicago, obviously, and they've presented actually a few brand new things, but the most new and probably most radical is what I'm holding here, and that is the Zephyr. So if you're familiar with the brand, like I said, they've been making more or less a similar style of watch for the last few years. They've been doing mid-century sport watches, all sort of riffing on a similar case and bracelet design, different sizes, different complications and such, but they're sort of one uniform sort of collection. And so they're breaking out of that mold quite dramatically here with the Zephyr, which is a like sort of an Art Deco style dress watch in a tonneau case. It's 31 millimeters wide, so quite narrow. So it's a really very classical and almost historically sized dress watch. The dial on it is there's two dials. There's a white and a black dial, and they both feature a lot of texturing, the kind of a beautiful guilloche style to them, and then only hour and minute hands. So really a very sort of traditional style to it. But the case is really the winner here. It's only 8 millimeters thick, and that is featuring a Miyota automatic movement. It's only 42 millimeters long as well. So this is really going to slip under the cuff and be something, very different from their other watches. And it's kind of a bold move for the brand, obviously taking a radical departure from their sport watch sort of heritage that they've built over the last few years, and really firmly staking their claim on that we're making a dress watch now, and one with a very elegant style. So in addition to the Zephyr, Laurier has also launched some upgrades or new versions of some of their existing models, and that includes the Falcon version 3. So like I said before, this is sort of their classic mid-century sport watch style. This is their smallest of that case design, so it's 36 millimeters, and there's been some fairly dramatic changes actually for this watch. So did that just completely change your thing? And look at that, there's a spotlight just for me. So some of the changes include a slightly new hand shape design. So the hour hand is now sort of a broader arrow to it. But the most kind of provocative element of this is the new dial design, which features a sort of explorer style 369 layout, which is then paired with a waffle dial on the background. For fans of those iconic mid-century explorers and pre-explorer type watches, I think this is just about the nicest thing on the market right now, or coming out soon, that will be available. And like their other watches, this is really well priced at around $499. Now we're at the Formex booth, and if you're not familiar, Formex is a sport watch brand, a Swiss-made watch brand that's really been focusing on really beautifully engineered and kind of overbuilt sport watches for quite a long time now. But in the last few years, really hit a stride with some new kind of core collections. And for just this week, they've launched the Reef GMT. So this is based on their Reef diver line, which is a 42 millimeter diver line with a really thin profile. So although this is a Swiss-made mechanical GMT, it's just a little bit over 11 millimeters thick. So one of the fantastic things about the Reef line that has been transferred over to the GMT is that this does feature an interchangeable bezel system. So when you order them, you can pick your bezel color, and then there's a way to actually just pop that bezel off should you want to change that color up in the future. The bezel is also a bi-directional 24-hour bezel. So with the GMT hand, then you have the ability to track up to 3 time zones, which is obviously fairly classic for this sort of style of watch. The watch is 42 millimeters wide, but it wears really quite different than you expect because it is fairly short lug to lug, but then very, very thin, which is really a fantastic feature of it. Inside is the Sellita SW330-2 GMT movement, and is a chronometer rated movement as well. And these watches start at 1,835 and go up depending on the strap options. Next up is Chicago's own Oken Oscar. So I'm sure this is a brand that everyone's very familiar with, helmed by Chase Fancher. Oken Oscar's just been a really well-loved brand in the kind of watch community for quite some time. For the first Windup watch fair in their hometown of Chicago, they really came out swinging and launched the Humboldt 7-year anniversary. So the Humboldt is an existing watch that has been in their collection for some time, but this is a new version that features an all sort of brass aesthetic. So you have a brass dial and a brass bezel, and what makes this really particularly interesting is that the bezel itself was lathed in-house by Oken Oscar's watchmaker Nate Babachek, and they've actually been doing some lathing demonstrations at the fair, which has been really cool to see and hear. You occasionally hear a little ring in the background, which is really, really nice. So the watch itself, it's this 39.5 millimeter sport watch design, sort of field watch, really classic Oken Oscar style with a sandwich dial, but here just rendered in this beautiful golden brass. Features a Sellita SW300 movement in it, and there was actually a limited edition of only 10 of these models, and they sold out, I think, at the moment that the show started. There was a rush on the booth, but so this one is a little posthumous, but it is definitely just worth taking a look at and checking out. Just a really nice piece by the brand. So next up is Autodromo, who another brand that you're likely very familiar with if you've been a reader of Warner Wound. We've been covering them the entire time that we've been running the website, and like us, the last year or so has been their 10th anniversary. And so for their 10th anniversary, they have just launched the Vallelunga 10th anniversary edition. So this is a new version of the first watch that they ever brought out. And if you have a really good memory, you'll remember that back then the watch was a quartz movement. It had this kind of cool Italian-inspired design, lugless case. And so to sort of speak to that original watch, you kept a lot of the design elements true. It is still a lugless case, but it's been really refined overall. So it's now a 40 millimeter lugless design. The fit and finish is really improved. It's really it's a little bit thinner, but it is featuring a mechanical movement this time. And there's 3 colors of it. There's the black, then white that the watch originally came in, and then this really cool gray with orange highlights, which I couldn't help but naturally gravitate towards. So these are available now, so go check them out on Autodromo's website. This next one I am personally quite excited for, and this is the Benrus Type II diver. So actually, if you were at Windup Watch Fair San Francisco, you might have gotten a preview of this little teaser, but it has now officially been released. So Benrus, an iconic American watch brand. They did a lot of military watches, and a couple years ago when they sort of brought the brand back, they did the Type I diver, and this is now the Type II, so the difference on them really being the dial designs. But both of these watches were 1970s military dive watches that met very strict military specifications. They're really, really tough tool watches, and they're designed for groups of the Navy that basically became Navy SEALs later on. But the Type II is just my personal favorite layout of this. It sort of looks like a hybrid of a dive watch and a field watch. It's really aggressive. The signature of these designs is obviously this sort of bowing left side, right side rather, that has the natural crown guard. So it's a very distinctive look to it, as well as the 12-hour bezel. So for this re-edition of the watch, it comes in at $14.95 and features a Soprod automatic movement. And these are available now. These are really cool. Like I said, these are basically the closest thing there's been to sort of like an iconic American military dive watch. And it's really cool to see just a very close kind of tribute to that. This is a really unique watch that has been sort of finally unveiled at Windup Watch Fair Chicago, and this is the Solabs Automatic. Solabs is a brand that came out a few years ago, and their first watch was a line of really graphically inspired quartz-based watches featuring these sort of clear plastic cases. We did review those. You should check them out on Warner Wound right now. And to follow up that model, they've come out with a metal automatic featuring a Sellita SW200. But obviously, as you can see here, is a really unique language in both the case and the dial design. So it's a very graphic, whimsical style of dial with several colors going on and the various different color options as well. This one here is sort of a pale blue. It's a very almost ceramic, matte sort of texture to all the elements on it. And the movement in here is actually a day date movement. Instead of showing the day date, they have colored discs and wheels that are seen through the aperture that is under 12 there. And what that does is sort of provide an ever-changing sort of color palette for the dial. So these are clearly very poetic, a really different style of watch. And then you have this really funky case with these really short lugs, sort of bulbous shapes to them. It's sort of an undeniably charming look to this. Not going to be for everyone, but I have to say, seeing it in person, this has been a highlight of the show for me. So these are going to start pre-ordering pretty soon, and I believe they're going to be priced in the like 900-ish for pre-order, and then a little over 1,000 when they are actually available. And so that's the end of Weekend Watches that are taking place, our special edition, like I said, in Chicago at the Windup Watch Fair. Next week we'll get back to our usual coverage and look back at probably actually a little bit of news that we missed over the last couple of weeks. Please don't forget to submit your questions for us. If there's anything that you've seen here you want a little more detail on, or something that has happened in the industry in the last couple of weeks, please let me know. I'd love to talk about it. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out wornandwound.com for daily news and reviews of awesome wristwatches. See you next time.